Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Backlot Review. Now, today's movie is one of the most anticipated movies of the entire year, and to tackle all this excitement, I brought along my good friend Brock.
Hi, what's up?
And of course, that movie is... That is right, part 2 of this new trilogy of Star Wars movies is finally out. And we finally get to see what happens after that pivotal moment where Rey hands Luke his lightsaber. And let's just say a whole lot happens after that. So yeah, we're going to give you guys the good, we're going to give you guys the bad. And instead of giving you guys a separate video where I have my my follow-up review, I'm going to go ahead and do a separate entire video just around spoilers. So if you're worried about spoilers, there aren't going to be any major ones here, but since this is a Star Wars movie and pretty much everything is a spoiler anyway, I am going to go ahead and put a little miniature spoiler warning for this video. But yeah, just know that I'm not going to hit on anything major, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, you don't have to worry about anything major being spoiled for you. Alright, so let's just go ahead and jump right into what we thought was good about the movie. Kick off this review, one of the biggest things that I thought was really good about this movie was that it is very different than any other Star Wars movie we've ever gotten. It really gave you a sense of what it really meant to be a Jedi or to have a connection to the Force. And just like the different creatures throughout the movie and how they interacted with the Force and all that, and just the different decisions that this movie makes and how characters are killed off and how the First Order is attacking the rebellion. All of that felt completely different than any other Star Wars movie we've seen before. It seemed like the First Order was more vicious this time around. It seemed like the rebellion was finally getting their butts handed to them at all points in this movie. And there was definitely a loss of hope throughout this entire movie. If A New Hope is all about how we are regaining that hope in the universe, this movie is about how it's being destroyed constantly. And then just in general, most of the characters were very good in this movie. Especially, the returning cast was really good. And even most of the new characters that came into this movie were very good.
Yeah, and a lot of the characters that are still being introduced have a lot more backstory into just what they're usually doing and how their attitudes and personalities are working with other people who are the main characters. So that's a really good thought to look at whenever you're watching the movie.
Yeah.
A lot of the banter between the characters is very strong with comedic effect. It's a lot of the things dealing with Rey, Finn, and everyone else involved in the movie. It relates to a lot of comedy relief, kind of diverting the huge seriousness into the details of what's going on in this movie.
And then, of course, some of the new creatures were also very good. Like, the Porgs were very entertaining and not entirely annoying, as you might expect. I know a lot of people going into this movie were thinking that they were going to be the new Jar Jar Binks, but they were actually pretty cute and didn't really do much to the story or against the story in any way, so...
They kind of seem like puffins.
Yeah, they were just little penguins on the little island. And
yeah.
They didn't really intrude on the story, so I thought that was pretty important. Whereas those little crystalline looking fox things on the new crate planet that we saw in the trailer, they were very cool, and they actually did serve a small point to the story, so I thought they were pretty amazing as well. And then just overall, the effects of this movie were amazing. The sound design is always amazing with that Skywalker sound in there. There were a lot of contrasting visuals throughout. There's this one scene where I'm not going to give away what happens, but it involves a main character's death, and the way that it happens is so beautiful and just it happens and the whole theater was silent for a good 5 seconds, and then the sound came back on, and it was just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I love how this trilogy has a trend of going back to the old days of the animatronics. And especially, there's a specific animatronic that comes back that is very special to a lot of people. So, but we'll save that for the spoiler review. And just like some of the new creatures, while most of them were CGI, there were some that were practical, and I thought that was really cool that they are continuing that trend for Star Wars movies.
It was also really exciting to see like the cinematic type of action in the movies. It was a lot more than for The Force Awakens. It had a lot more, I guess, detail into what is going on and kind of the attitudes of other people and how they work. It was pretty good.
And yeah, I was going into this movie after I had watched the original trilogy. You kind of remember how little fast action there is. There's a lot of action in those movies, but it's not all that fast. And you go into this new trilogy, and a trend started with The Force Awakens is that they're really kicking up the action and the excitement when it comes to these battles. Alright, so unfortunately, this is still a movie, and no movie is perfect. So, we're going to talk about what we thought was bad about this movie. Right off the bat, the one thing that really kept me from absolutely loving this movie was the fact that literally almost every decision that happens in this movie ends up being some kind of plot twist. Now I know we can't elaborate on that in this review, but we will talk about more of those in the spoilers. But just like every other scene was like a twist on something, and it starts to get a little jarring. And you know, I don't mind a good plot twist. I think they really do add to the movie, and you don't want to go in expecting something to happen. But when literally everything that you were doing that's important in the movie then ends up being like thrown out the window because of a twist, it just kind of takes away the impact of that decision or that action scene or that whatever ends up happening, because you instantly take it away right there.
It seems like the context is taken out of place in the fact that some of the information doesn't connect.
And then just in general, I personally thought that some of the character motivations were a little strange. You just have some characters that do things that, you know, they're supposed to have learned to not do in previous movies, especially with some of the more returning characters. It just seemed like, you know, why would you go through all this to then end up going in that direction? You know, again, that kind of goes with the plot twist things where it's like someone will do something here, but then later on they'll change their mind and go a completely opposite direction. And then lastly, like, there were just way too many questions unanswered in this movie. You go into this movie expecting for all these questions. You have all these questions from The Force Awakens, and you go into this movie.
Essentially, we only get one or two questions answered, and then it seems like we get 2 hours of something that doesn't really relate to the last movie. And especially for that, we have to wait for another 2 years for that movie to come out.
Right.
So it seems too drawn out.
Right. So essentially you have all these questions going in from The Force Awakens. Barely any of those get answered. And then on top of that, you have questions from this movie alone that you would expect to get answered in Episode 9. But now we're going to have to get answers for all these other questions and these questions from Episode 8 all stacked into Episode 9, and I don't think that they're going to be able to do it, personally. So we'll just have to see if they have like more movies revolved around some of these other characters. You know, maybe 10 or 15 years down the line we'll get a Kylo Ren movie that will really explain his backstory, or like a movie involving Snoke in some way and involving his backstory. But I'm just telling you guys now that those questions are not answered in this movie. Alright, so with all that being said, we're going to go ahead and give you guys our rating. I'm going to personally rate the movie an 8 out of 10. And Brock?
I will rate it a 9 out of 10. Just because I'm a great Star Wars fan and I think it was great.
And yeah, I thought personally it could use a little bit more work. Is it the best made Star Wars movie? Probably not. Is it one of my favorite Star Wars movies? I would say definitely.
Yeah, I would say that there's minor things that I didn't really think should have been in the movie. But yeah, I would give it a 9 out of 10 for that.
So yeah, that is our review for Star Wars Episode VIII, The Last Jedi. Make sure you stick around for my spoiler review where we go deep into the different spoilers for the movie, and obviously you're going to make sure you've seen the movie before you watch that video. Also make sure you go ahead and like and subscribe down below. You can also check out my Instagram down below, and I'll link Brock's Instagram down there as well if you want to check his out. But yeah, with that being said, I'm going to bring this video to a close, and make sure you guys go out there and live fearlessly.